Dish Lake, White Bear Lake, Lake Whipple, Lake Minnewaska. By whatever name, always beautiful. Sometimes a challenge to transportation. Sometimes a means. In earlier times, the Minnewaska Valley was home to Native Americans. It was so for centuries. They lived there. They celebrated there. They died there. The lake lies at the edge of the prairie. In the early 1800s, the lake was on the frontier between the ever-warring Dakota and Ojibway peoples. It may have served as a buffer and guarded against violence in at least a portion of this conflict. The early 1800s brought political change and new transportation technology to the area. The United States purchased most of what is now Minnesota and the Dakotas from France as a part of the Louisiana Purchase in 1803. Treaties between the United States and the Dakota, Ojibway, and Winnebago nations made new land available. Our government's presence was established in Minnesota by construction of Fort Snelling at the confluence of the Minnesota and Mississippi rivers. New developments in steam power were applied to maritime uses. Fort Snelling was accessed and supplied by travelers on steam-powered vessels. Farmers from the east joined trappers and traders already living in the area. Our nation reached out to discover what had been obtained in the new purchase. In 1858, an expedition was sent out to find a substance which was scarce and valuable. Oddly, salt was the oil of its day. The 1858 salt expedition traveled through what was to become Pope County, and the beauty of the Minnewaska Valley became known. This expedition was the first of many events which were to shape the community that now exists around the lake. These events include congressional approval of statehood for Minnesota in 1858, Abraham Lincoln elected as president in 1860, legislative naming and defining of Pope County in 1862, and settlement of Lake Johanna area by Norwegian immigrants in 1862. On the national front, Abraham Lincoln was inaugurated on March 4, 1861. The Civil War commenced with an attack on Fort Sumter 5 weeks later. Despite the war, the Lincoln presidency saw passage of new laws which would greatly benefit Pope County. These laws, enacted in 1862, included the Homestead Act, which made land available to immigrant farm families. It also funded their schools. The Morrill Act gave vitality to our universities, and the Railroad Act furnished the land and the money with which our railroads were built. The war fostered great improvements in transportation technology. Trains became ever faster and more reliable. The same can be said for steam-powered maritime travel. The story of the battle between the ironclads Merrimack and Monitor is well known. Less known is the story of the destruction of Confederate ironclad Albemarle by a small Union steam launch. Picket Boat 1 was manned by 14 Union Marines. They were assigned with the capture of the Albemarle. Failing capture, they were to destroy the ironclad using a spar torpedo affixed to a pole held in front of the launch. The commander was Lieutenant William Cushing, a man more known for his recklessness than his discipline. Lieutenant Cushing returned victorious, having first had his jacket shot off from his back and the sole of his shoe shot from under his foot. The Albemarle would do no more damage to Union ships. In short order, small steamboats gained acceptance as a fast, safe, and even luxurious means of travel. The early Lincoln years were also times of great conflict in Minnesota and great change in Pope County. Lake Minnewaska was once known as Lake Whipple in honor of Henry Benjamin Whipple. H.B. Whipple began his mission work in Minnesota in 1859. He became friends with the Dakota and Ojibway alike, while also attending to the spiritual needs of settlers throughout the state. He was called Owotanna Wohdaka, or straight tongue, by his Dakota friends in recognition of his honest and direct manner. In August of 1862, some members of a starving and impoverished Dakota band went to war against their white neighbors. Other Dakota did not fight. Some sought to warn settlers at great personal cost. During the fighting, 500 soldiers and settlers died. 60 Dakota were killed. Thousands of settlers were displaced. When it was over, 2,000 Dakota were in custody. 303 were sentenced to hang. The others were interred at Fort Snelling. Whipple feared for the people of this state, all of the people. He sought the ear of President Lincoln and pled for leniency. After talking with Whipple, the president personally reviewed each case. He spared 265 lives. It was not a popular decision. The remaining 38 were hanged, with the vengeful cheers of the crowd ringing in their ears. This event remains the largest mass execution in U.S. history, and all Dakota were expelled from Minnesota the following year, and a bounty placed on their lives. But much injustice was prevented. The violence ended. Peace prevailed, thanks in no small part to Owotanna Wohdaka, a man who spoke. Whipple continued to minister to the Dakota by providing asylum to some. He confirmed as Christians over 100 of the captives at Snelling. Much of the state, Pope County included, had no permanent white population during the conflict, and virtually none remained in Minnesota after it was over. But Whipple continued to serve the needs of new settlers. He did so by building and consecrating churches across the state, including St. Paul's in Glenwood. Shortly after the Civil War, lands made available by the Railroad Act were sold. Pope County was legally organized in 1866. The city of Glenwood was platted the same year. The following year, the county's first white child was born. His parents named him Glenwood Newton Sprague. And so the population grew. Transportation around and across the lake continued to be difficult, but steam power made the problem manageable. Many are familiar with photos of the launch Minnewaska. The Minnewaska navigated the lake for some years prior to 1910, and she was the last launch providing commercial transit across the lake, but she was certainly not the first. It is not known exactly how many steam launches predate the Minnewaska. An early oil painting by Alice Thorson depicts one small steam launch. It was likely piloted by County Patriarch John Q. Hook. And Hook may also have piloted the Helen. It is known that he was a good businessman and that he was ever attentive to the needs of Pope County tourists. The grandest vessel to grace these waters may have been the Lily of the Lake. The Lily was a double-deck steam vessel. She carried as many as 40 passengers. It is known that the Lily sank off from Halverson's Point, but that was not her end. Several teams of horses hitched together were able to pull her ashore. she was repaired and placed back into service. Pope County has a surprisingly rich maritime history. Some communities so blessed have found ways to preserve their maritime heritage. We have learned about the Cushing. Using plans found in the Smithsonian Institution, residents along the Roanoke River in North Carolina have created an operational replica of this vessel. It sails regularly and functions today much as it would have 150 years ago. It is not alone. Operating steam launches may be found in many communities today, but living history ships like the Cushing are special. They deliver untold historic, artistic, educational, economic, and social benefits to their respective port of call. The waters of Lake Minnewaska present a perfect home for such a vessel. But by what name should such a vessel be hailed? Maritime tradition requires that a true ship bear a fair name. Fair has special meaning for a sailor. A fair breeze is both well-tempered and constant. A well-faired hull has smooth and graceful lines. It tracks true in the water and glides straight, pulling neither right nor left. Minnewaska is a Dakota term for good water. History provides a fair name for a vessel with which to ply our good water. Owotanna Wohdaka. Owotanna Wohdaka on Minnewaska. Truth on beauty. A fair ship on good water. It is a good name for a vessel with which to grace a lake of such beauty.